She's deluded. It's delusion. What I want to unpick with you is why a leader like Liz Truss appears to have no sense of embarrassment about turning up tomorrow at the Institute of Government, criticising the person who took over from her and had to restore some sense of credibility and respectability to this country. What is it? Because I think she appears shameless. That's my personal view. I'm setting my stall out very early here. And there's a kind of tin-earedness to it. And I want to discuss with you whether or not you think it's just her, or do you think this marks a sea change in the kinds of politicians that we have? I think we could probably quite quickly draw a line back to Boris Johnson and his behaviour. To start the conversation, I'm joined by David Gauke, former Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister. David Gauke, thank you very much indeed for joining me this afternoon. Can I start by asking you the first of those questions? Can you cast your mind back for me to about a year ago, and that sense that the country had, I think, that we were just thrown into choppy waters like a tiny boat at sea? How did you feel that period of time? What were you seeing? What's your memory of it?
Well, it was an extraordinary period of time. Things were moving incredibly quickly. Matters were unravelling. I remember watching Kwasi Kwarteng's budget, and I'd been involved in every budget and autumn statement and spring statement from 2010 until 2017, and I was just flabbergasted that he'd essentially delivered a budget that ignored any of the financial constraints or any of the political constraints that the rest of us had always worked under. It's all very well, coming up with policy ideas, but you have to work within the fiscal and political realities. And essentially, he seemed to decide, and Liz Truss seemed to decide, that they were just going to do what they wanted, regardless of the consequences, regardless of what the bond markets how they were going to react, and regardless of how the politics was going to play out. And it was an extraordinary thing to say. And then, of course, from that point on, it was just one humiliation after another. As you say, the pound crashing, gilt yields going up, so people paying more on their mortgages as a consequence. Our international reputation, you just heard this again and again, our international reputation really tanking from a not particularly high base after Brexit and Boris Johnson. And there you were with the UK essentially a bit of a laughingstock, and the government then rapidly retreating from everything it announced. Now, I've been involved in U-turns as a Treasury Minister, but essentially every aspect of the budget was being abandoned, forced in a particular direction because of those realities. They'd been so arrogant to believe that they could ignore them, but they were proven spectacularly wrong very quickly.
Do you know she will currently be picking up £115 of taxpayers' money, because once you're Prime Minister in this country, you are then entitled to £115,000 for your personal protection. So she still got that. She was still able to submit an honours list.
She should be paying that back to all the people that have risen all their mortgages. Let's get her out. We don't need her.
Well, she's been invited to speak. I was actually trying to look up how much she has earned since leaving office. What I know, the first thing she did was essentially go over to the United States and rebrand herself as a free marketeer who was misunderstood and was earning a minimum of £20,000 per speech. Who in their right minds is taking economic advice from her?
Exactly. Look at what she's done. And she all the way through her campaign, that's what she kept saying. I'll cut taxes. Rishi Sunak was saying, do not cut taxes. You do not cut it. And what did she do? Cut it. And then what? Ran after 45 days.
Josie in Leicester, thank you very much indeed. For the purposes of balance, I'm pleased to say that a couple of you have texted in favour of Liz Truss. This from Chrissy in Soham in Cambridgeshire. Sangita, the Liz Truss Kwasi Kwarteng budget was and still is perfectly sound and radical. They just didn't give enough notice of their plans. Exclamation mark. We would be in a much better place, growth-wise by now, if they had been allowed to continue their plans. They can be proud to say, we were right. Look at what's happening in the Eurozone. Time will tell, but I predict their mini-budget will be done again in the future. The Bank of England have a lot to answer for in terms of how they behaved. Chrissy and Soam, thank you for that text. Stephen, a new caller in Kennington. Hello.
Hi, Sangita.
Are you going to be welcoming Liz Truss back tomorrow?
No. Listen, yeah. Honestly, everyone is feeling the effect of Trussonomics. And then the last text that you just read out, perfectly sound. The mini budget was good. It's actually funny because she's come out like this, to be honest, because I remember last year, prices were going up, NHS strikes, and before Kwasi Kwarteng's budget issue had taken place, like, this was horrible. This was a bad time for Britain. And what did she do? She dropped out completely. She gave up. Rishi Sunak, personally, he's not the best candidate in my opinion, but he's what we've got, and he's doing what needs to be done. And the only problem is that when it comes to spending, rather than spending less, we are spending more. So how can she say that she would have saved the country when in that period she cut her losses completely? And literally, as you said, what she did cost people thousands. I mean, look at the concrete issue that took place in my little brother's primary school. And she claims that we need to halt spending.
She's deluded. It's delusion. It's delusion. And why, I understand what you're saying about spending more in real terms, not necessarily, but you're absolutely right. We've literally got building collapse in some schools. And she's suggesting that Rishi Sunak, the man who, by the way, decided to rebuild only two schools instead of 7, isn't spending enough. It's almost as like she's operating in a parallel universe. It's bonkers. Anyway, Stephen, a new caller. Thank you very much indeed.